Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome back. This is part 2 concept design, a part of an architectural series on the design process. We're going to take a look at importing in a model from CAD Mapper into Rhino in this case, but you can also bring that into SketchUp if you'd like. We're going to discuss how to layer in information to help inform a concept and how that might drive the design. We're also going to cover how to develop a list of program that you might need for that building and how we can use a bubble diagram simultaneously with your 3D model to then help inform it as you develop those concepts. We're also going to take a look at how to find inspiration images and how to then sketch a part T diagram to then help drive the concept designs as well. All right, so let's get right into it. Okay, so first things first, how do we get the model in? Well, let me go and delete this out. So when we go to bring in our CAD Mapper file into Rhino, what we'll want to do is go to File and then Import. I already have a file open that's in feet and inches, but we can go and double check that together. We can go to File, Import, and then when we go to do that, we want to find where we have downloaded our CAD Mapper file. Once again, it comes in as a zipped file, so you have to right-click on that folder, say Extract All, and then go into that folder and find your CAD Mapper file. And then we just say open, and it's going to come on in, and we'll just let it land where it lands for right now. We're just using this model for concept. We're not going to be doing schematic with this. So we really just need it for a basic understanding of size, position, shape, context of the site. It doesn't have to be super accurate. We can develop it later. We'll talk a little bit about its inaccuracies today, just so we have an understanding and awareness of it. So if I double click on the view menu, if you're new to Rhino, that'll get you full screen or back out, top, front, right. And then you have your 3D, kind of a typical layout for CAD programs. And then in the top view, we can type in the command distance. And if we have the project icon on for the O snaps here at the bottom, then it will, when I snap, it's going to be on the same plane. It's going to be in that top construction plane. And if you want to see the construction plane, if I go down to wireframe here, you'll see that when I'm in project, when I'm here, it's actually projecting onto this C plane, this construction plane here that exists on the XY axis. So I'm going to go and click right here. And I'm going to go and click over here. And I see my measurement up in the command prompt. I see that it's at 126 feet and 3/4 of an inch. So that is the unit of measure that I was expecting. If you are getting something different, type in the word units. So hit escape a couple times, type in the word units, and then it'll pull open the document properties and take you right to the units and model area because we're dealing with the model screens. Model units is in feet. That's what I want. Display feet and inches. That's what I want. Say okay. Now, obviously, if you want something different, this is the time to change it. Just say okay. So what's nice to know is that even though CAD Mapper, that file is made in meters, when it was imported into this file that we opened, it automatically scaled it appropriately. So that's good news. And if I wanted to double check that, I would just go over to Google Earth and we'll go and use the measurement tool in Google Earth. So I'm going to click on the 2D option right there. I'm going to click on the north arrow to swing this around. And then let's go and zoom a little bit closer in, and we're just going to click point to point, and that is going to show us that we are pretty darn close to what we're expecting, right? It's going to be showing 130 feet here on Google Earth, but I'm sure the overhang on this might be throwing that off a little bit too. We could also, as we measure, if you turn off 3D buildings, you might remember that from the previous video. If we go to 2D, this could also just help us measure a little bit more accurately. And here we see it's a lot more true to 126. So the 3D aspect of everything could throw off your measurements. The other thing that's kind of cool that I misspoke in the last video, and so here's a correction on that, is when I hover, if you look at the very bottom right corner underneath this globe right here, very bottom right corner, it'll actually tell you the height elevation. So before, when I was in the measurement tool, I was not 100% accurate in saying that you could measure 3D with this tool. You can measure 3D, the third dimension. If you hover, it's a little bit more accurate. So if I'm hovering here on the water, sea level here, I'm at 176 meters. This is a lake, but 176 meters above sea level. And then if I hover here on the boardwalk, I am 177 meters, so about 3 feet taller, 3.2 feet taller. And then I was correct in my assumption that this is about 12 feet taller. So if we hover on this path here, this walking path up here, we're at 182 meters. And then if I go over to the other lake side, just to verify, I'm at 176, which makes sense. Water should level out. And on the road here, 177. So these two are on the same heights. And then up here, once again, 182, 12 feet taller. So if I were to go to make this as a topography, it would be flat, come up 3 feet, then be flat for the distance that we can measure here from edge to edge, about 56 feet. And then it would go up, and obviously these are stairs, but it would go up 12 feet. And then it would go across those 12 feet. I want to clear my measurement, otherwise it will add them as I click. So I don't want to add that 56 feet onto here. It will be across about 320 feet. And then if we hit escape, we can click over it, and then about 80 feet for the road, 78 to 80 feet for the road. So that's how we can go and pull our measurements, and that's how we can determine how accurate everything is. I don't think I'm going to bother modeling this topography and updating Rhino terribly on this, unless I feel like it's impeding my ability to make a concept model that actually can stick and be used for a schematic. When I get into schematic, that's when I'll really care about modeling all this completely accurate. Right now, we're just trying to get a massing, an idea as a 3D item that we can then take further into schematic design with some real numbers and some more accuracy. So for right now, this is just verified everything that I need to know about the model. And let's get back into Rhino. So in Rhino, now I'm going to go over to just a Arctic mode because I think it just looks cleaner and it just relaxes me as I go to model, where it doesn't feel stressful. There's not too many lines, not overwhelming. Let's take a look at the Rhino model and digest what's going on here. So by default, when I open up a Rhino, I have layer 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Right now, there should be really nothing on these. I also have the default layer. So if I want to take layers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and just delete those for right now, I can. Makes my model a little simpler. Then let's go and explore these other layers that came in from CAD Mapper. So buildings, if I hide those with the little light bulb right here, we can see that those are the 3D massings of these buildings. So for right now, let's just go and hide them. Parks, if we look on Google Earth, that's going to be the green space. So we see all these little, obviously it's not really a park, but you see all these little green areas here. Very pleasant and nice to walk around. If we go into Rhino, that's what these little guys are. And so if we hide those parks, we can see that those are there. What might be handy to help organize the layer is to give the layer something that kind of makes sense in terms of color. If you would like, say okay. And then all those parks are showing up green. We turn off parks. Water are these two rectangular forms here. So water, let's go and change that to blue. We'll turn that off. And then outline, that's the roads and paths. Change it to like a dark gray just to differentiate. And then the topography, here's what's wrong about this file here, and I'll turn the water back on. They have the water at two different levels, right? We just explored Google, and we saw that was at 176 meters above. So these two really need to plane out correctly. But right now, it doesn't matter for our concept, right? We don't really have to spend the time making this perfect. All right, so we're going to go into buildings here, and we're going to start to develop some concepts pretty soon to replace this tent structure, which is right here. And because this is a special thing that we're going to be taking away, what I want to do is make a layer underneath this. So I'm going to make a sublayer, and I'm going to call this existing building or structure to demo. And we'll just make that red. Well, we have the item selected, then we right click on that sublayer and we just say change object layer. And now it's on that object layer. So we can see it right here. Here we also see that there's another piece to it right here underneath it, kind of inside this tent structure. And we also want to right click and say change object layer. All right, so now that we have those two, if we hide that it goes away. So then we have that cleared out for our concepts. Isn't that magnificent? The other thing I might want to think about is right now everything is above the construction plane for the top view. I might want to bring my buildable area just down onto that plane. I think it's Control A to select all. And then let's go and do a move command. From the model, let's turn off project. So in 3D, we can snap to an endpoint kind of in the middle here. And then let's turn project back on. And let's go and bring that to the origin. So we can just say 0. So I'm not even clicking, I'm just typing 0, 0, 0. But actually all you have to really type in is 0, and then it'll assume 0 for the rest. Hit enter. And then that point that we had clicked on is then brought down to the origin. Okay, now we're ready to start drawing out our boundary. I'm just going to go to polyline here. I'm just going to rough in a boundary here, layer, the sublayer that I made is. And then we can give this a color as well. So let's go and give it like a yellow color here. All right, so we can turn off the light bulb on buildings. If we turn it off on buildings, it's going to turn off this layer too. This is what I was thinking. So we're actually going to move this out, move up one parent, and then we're going to rename this layer to be just boundary. I think I spelled that right. Yeah, I did. It's hiding everything else. So all we have is this boundary. So in the top view, if we click on this and then type in ZSA, now we have this kind of subtle boundary. As we develop our concepts, it's not in the way. Then later we could layer in more information. The other thing I want to do here, we have boundary selected. Let's double click on default and then let's just lock all of these other layers. The other thing I would like to do is create another layer and just name it site information. And we'll move that up. And then let's take all of these, so hold on shift and drag and drop them into site information. So if we unlock all of these now this can control them all. And we can just collapse that so our layer stack looks really nice and neat. Now we want to make new layers for each concept. So call this concept 1. All right. Now if we're in concept 1, now when we draw, it's going to be nice and easy to keep everything organized. We can turn off the light bulb on different concepts to just show one or the other. The next thing we need to do is get into actually talking about how we can start to infuse information from our pre-design into this and how that has an effect on our concepts. And then also talk about programming, bubble diagramming, how to do those both simultaneously, as well as finding some inspiration images to help drive our concepts and create a part T diagram to help drive our concepts as well. All right, so concept design can be a love-hate. This is normally where we have our most fun moments and also our most aggravating moments. The majority of the concepts I make, I don't like. I think the ability to identify what you don't like is a strong suit, but it's hard to see it that way. You just feel like you're failing over and over again. But eventually you'll come across something that you do like, and that's really where the designer has control, right? You get to decide what gets through your filter. So think of concept design as just collecting information, infusing information, and allowing your information to help grow your designs, find good inspiration, and start to recreate and put your own spin on things. Don't be afraid to find someone else's design and use that inspiration as a core value to that project. It's not insulting, it's not copying. You were ultimately put your spin on your design. So don't be afraid, don't be fearful that if you find a really great inspiration image that somehow by the end, when your project's all said and done, that's going to look identical to that project. There's no way that's going to happen. You'd have to try very intentionally all the way through with all the layers of information to copy that design. And that would be very difficult to do. And that obviously would not be the right thing to do. So I would not worry about it, but I know some people do. So I thought that's important to mention. Let's talk about that journey, that path that your concept will go into design development. Let's talk about what this looks like, layering in information, when to layer in certain information. When do we talk about structures? What comes first? And there's no right answer, but I can tell you how it influences your design. So the sooner you layer in information for your project, the sooner you start to take it a particular direction. So let's say right off the bat, you're very interested in your 3D perspectives. So your massings, right? And so you're like, I need it to look like this in the end. That's going to be a strong direction for your project. Now, you could also have gone the route of, I really care about economy. And you might be looking at some things that influence that. So you might be designing right off the bat in plan on a structural grid. And that would be something like a dot grid that has some typical column spacing. And as you go and draw out how your building is going to look, you might be subconsciously making things very rigid and very rectilinear and straight and square in plan in order to create a efficient structural system, right? And then from there, you might start looking at this 3D perspective, and then you slowly get to the aesthetic you want on the outside because you influenced it with that economy earlier than you did 3D perspective. You've taken it on a tangent and a path. So by the time you do consider 3D, it's already been morphed into that economy pipeline. So in my opinion, when you go and do concept design, it's okay to start in any realm, right? Considering solar, considering neighboring context, considering exterior aesthetics, functionality. There's certain things you might be looking at. The sooner you infuse that in concept design, the sooner you take your design down a path, and the more difficult it is to veer in the other direction. However, you still can. Layer in your information based on your priorities. If you really prioritize something, bring it in first. I plan on making an arcade kind of gaming lounge area. So it's going to be an A3 building classification, gaming/lounge. I'm thinking in terms of gaming, VR, I'm thinking metaverse, I'm thinking a place to socialize and also interact with technology. So in person and virtually, and possibly a place for augmented reality. So there needs to be some flexible space. So first things first, let's make our program. So admin, storage, Mac, repair shop. I see that all as kind of back of house items. Green, and this will be things that are supplementary to the gaming area. Lockers, snack bar, bathrooms. The lobby we could see as kind of an amenity as well. Then we could have kind of our main program area, and we'll just make that like a light blue. That's the gaming and lounge. This is now how I'm thinking about my bubble diagrams. So in the bubble diagrams, I can go two different routes. I can go by name of room, or I can go by type of room, depending on how I want to organize. In a really large building, I suggest, with a huge program, I would suggest color coding, and first make your bubbles based on color, and then subdivide those bubbles into the specific program that you were thinking to include. That just makes it graphically a whole lot easier to lay out the adjacencies of spaces and where things need to go. The other thing I need to keep in mind is I still need circulation. I need to think about egress. I need to think about accessibility, but we can infuse that into our design a little bit later. So if it's going to be multiple stories tall, I need to be thinking about two ways, two staircases to get out. And you can look at code based on building classification to find out how many of those need to be fully enclosed and protected with 2-hour ratings, how many can be like decorative staircases. So we're just about ready to start bubbling, but before we do, I actually like to go find some inspiration images first, and then I'm going to make a part T diagram, and then we're going to bubble and make our masses. Let's go over to some inspiration. So what I'm thinking here is doing something that's kind of warm, is tectonic in nature. So Tectonic being the construction method creates some of the visual aesthetic. And I'm looking here at mass timber, a lot of repetition, pattern. I think it's very interesting and very neat. Kind of get a different feel here. This obviously is not a mass timber structure, but kind of embodies that repetition and pattern. And Navy Pier kind of being suspended out over the water. I thought this could kind of be a good inspiration for something like that as well. In the same vibe, this massive repetition. So actually this I feel like is my strongest concept inspiration image, and the other two relate to it. Now, your inspiration images can be one per concept. You can have a general theme and then subdivide concepts within one major theme. So it's kind of up to you. But now at this point, what I need to do is create a focus on these concepts, and that can be embodied in a parti diagram, parti, P-A-R-T-I. In the sketchbook, I'm going to create a parti. What I'm picturing here is nested spaces, and I'm picturing views of the water. So my parti is going to be driven by that concept of nested space under one major roof line while still maintaining nice views of the water. If I have water on two ends, which I do, and I have this large Ferris wheel here, I want my parti diagram to be focused on there being a central core of, let's say, like potentially administrative offices, but then having great views and access, because we also, if you remember, a little boardwalk along these outsides. And then I want to do some kind of really cool kind of roof line where it's kind of nested. I was always the guy that I was taking notes in school. I'd run out of room on the page or need to go back, or the professor would erase something on the board and I would never leave enough room to insert something into where they had inserted new information. So I've been really appreciating the ability to edit and reposition sketches. Let's go and even sketch out a simpler parti then. As a main form with views, right? It's okay to have text on your parti. I actually don't want views on these ends. I'm thinking that will become my circulation spaces. I'm capping off the ends. I know the Ferris wheel is right there, but that's its own entity in my mind. So I want to kind of keep that close, but not part of this building's experience. Cool. So that's my parti, right? Main organization. Now my concepts will be built off of that. So when I go to do concepts, if you're a great sketcher, sketch them out. If you are better at modeling, model them. If you want to do a little bit of both, do a little bit of both. So at this point, this is probably where I'm going to speed up the video, and you'll see me just messing around in Rhino and potentially sketching out some ideas, some concepts. What's going to just to help give us a direction and a feel for what we want. And then we'll develop that further in schematic design, where we will actually be concerned about how everything is going to truly fit with real numbers on the site. All right, here we go. All right, so let me talk you through just this bubble real quick. So what I did was I highlighted some general themes and areas, and I kind of zoned it out by color. And then as I bubbled in the rooms, I subdivided some bubbles inside these main forms. And what I did was then associate adjacencies where I think things should go. So for example, I remember from Google Earth that this is kind of a back alleyway, perfect place for mechanical and storage. I wanted to avoid having the mechanical on the other side, where that's more the main point of entry. If you remember from the first video, pre-design, we were saying that this could be a nice prominent entry point, even though we don't want it to be a huge visual for experiencing the building. So that's going to be the lobby side in this bubble diagram. And then main program area in the middle. creating good views still to the outside. So I'm thinking lots of glazing. This side here is being a little bit more capped off, but can still be pretty open for views, but less for user experience. AR, VR. I do know for VR, it's better to have a little bit less light, so it's deeper into the building. And then computer console, and we'll do like lounge here as well. Or potentially lockers could line the cores. And so that actually might be even better. And have like a pathway to get through the building and keep AR, VR in this center area. So as you think through it, right, you just layer in more information, think more practicality. That's what I did here. I was thinking about adjacencies as I subdivided these zones. And when I made the zones, I was really kind of thinking big picture. How do I maintain my views? Where am I coming into the building? What are some of the first things I need to see as an end user? What are some of the things that I need to have available to me as an administrative person, someone who's working there? And so you have to just consider all aspects of who's using the building, what they're going to be needing, and in the program, what needs to be near each other. Okay, so that's just playing around with one concept. What I'm going to do from here is go to double click on concept 2 to make that my primary default layer. And I'll lock and hide concept 1. And now I just rinse, wash, repeat. So what you just saw there was the rinse, clean the slate. That's why you want to keep everything on one layer for concept 1. You can add sub layers within there, but you want to be able to control the whole concept with one layer. Work through concept 2, look back at your inspirations, look back at bubble diagramming, double check that you might need to update something or change or completely shift gears on concepts, depending on how much you liked your first concept, and then work into 3. I really recommend you do 3 concepts in this phase. It's easy to fall in love with your first design, but very rarely is your first design your best design. So keep that in mind. Force yourself to brainstorm, force yourself to like and not like your work. And hopefully in the end, you'll find something that really hits home and that you'll want to take into schematic design, which will be our next video. All right, thanks again. Don't forget to save, subscribe, and I'll talk to you later.